Okay, so comfortable in your chair. First of all, sitting up, feet down, and sit against the back of the chair to support your back if you feel you need it. Don't strain. And then just rubbing your hands together and tapping over your face. So our normal routine, just use the familiarity of it to draw yourself in, just feel the sensation of this tapping on your face and then over your head. You go down to one shoulder, quite a strong movement. You can almost feel the muscle there shaking slightly. Likewise in the arm, but not stiff. It's quite a loose movement. The other side. And then upper part of your chest. Belly. And finally your legs. Again, quite strong on your legs. But sometimes when you do this, you get this kind of slightly tingly feeling. But when you sit back, just allow that to settle in its own time. Feel your hips dropping back into the chair. Back and down, buttocks, lower back, and somewhere about the middle of your back. And feeling that your whole body is sort of almost like it's melting into those areas and through those areas. It's really just this sensation of that stiff feeling, that tight feeling beginning to drain away. Place your hand on your belly, just slightly below your navel. See if you can feel the very gentle rise and fall there as you breathe in and out. It's really quite a small movement. You can't really see it, but you can feel the movement underneath your hands, expanding, contracting with in and out breath. And then draw your feet in. Come back to the upright position. Try and feel a little bit of your weight in your feet. Excuse me. And then just slowly turning your head. And the shoulders, hands in front of your shoulders. Always starting off with the first couple of anything really, just sort of testing the water. How far can you move freely? Remember that feeling within your body that we get when the posture is correct, which is that somehow there seems to be more space within the body, that movement, and muscles and the circulation and so on, just that little bit freer, less restricted. And then going forwards. And then hands down to your sides, winding around, feeling the just very subtle movements across the pectoral muscles, across the ribs, opening and then closing. Similarly, across your back, it's like your shoulder blades draw apart as you turn the hands back and then slide back together here. Turn the hands forwards. And then and back the other way. And rest. Now, when you sit like this in this position, about 2/3 of your weight back in your hips. So aware of the pressure in your legs, but it's not huge. But also from side to side, 50% of your weight on each side. So you're squarely in the middle from left to right. And just try and maintain that as you go forwards and backwards. So here, maybe 50, maybe 60% of your weight in your feet. That really means 30% in each foot. And when you push down, it's an even push to take you back. Remember also that your hips drop back. So particularly in your lower back, you can feel this little extension and contraction. Just go easy with that. The muscles extend out, but not stretching, not pulling really tightly. So the overall feeling in the movement, it's described as though it's a massage, as though your lower back and the rest of your body is being massaged. Inside the body, terms like washing, bathing, again, massaging are often used to describe the feeling of the movement around your body, within your body. And then turn a little. So now, when you go to this position, you should find more of your weight in this leg. And then you come back and more of your weight in this hip. So right foot, left hip. So you're taking a diagonal line across this square. Square formed by your feet and your hips at the corners. And then turn the other way. And now, when you go forwards, the majority of your weight in your left leg. When you go back, the majority of your weight in your right hip. And this is really just about learning to differentiate. Oh yeah, the weight changes. So now you go forwards and you swing round to your right and you feel the weight change into the right leg. You go back again into your right hip. And as you turn, you feel yourself go across to your left hip and then forwards towards your right hip and across again. So you can start off doing this as a square. So you're going around the edges of the square and then just allow it to become smoother so the square rounds off. We're going to change direction. So from your right hip, go forwards to your right leg, turn slightly, get into your left leg and back into your right hip, turn slightly again, go across to your right. And again, just let it gradually smooth off. So if you can be aware of the weight change here, then when you come to standing, it'll be much clearer to you. As always, in the chair, we have this very subtle element. There is a little bit of weight change, but maybe 10%. It's never going to be huge, never as clear, I think, never as obvious as when you're standing. And coming back to the center. So now back to 2/3 back, 50% on each side, hands by your side, and just linking that movement of your weight with that opening and closing feeling in your chest and your upper back, going forwards and back. So as you go back, the chest opens, shoulder blades slide together. When you go forwards, it's like the sternum withdraws, pulling your ribs together, two sides of your ribs together. So from the side, I'm going to exaggerate this. Here, my back is really open. As I go back, I get to hear the chest opens. Now, as I go forwards, then it's like, if I exaggerate here, it's like I'm doing that. See how my shoulders seem to be coming in front of my sternum. And that's combined, that's much more subtle than that because it's combined with the transfer of the weight. So if we can get to a point where the feeling of the weight transferring is just a familiar feeling, so we don't have to keep thinking about it, it really helps to guide all the movements. It's a bit more straightforward really to feel it with these initial movements, because quite deliberately we have the simpler movements at the start so that we can begin to establish these basic principles. Now, Fisherman Cast neck, same opening and closing in your chest and your upper back, which helps to move your arms. Plus the arms pick up, because they're swinging, a certain amount of momentum. So they start to swing a little bit further. And that should make the movements in the upper part of your body a little bit clearer as well. So that lengthening through your spine and back, and then contracting, as though there was just a thread of elastic going through the middle of your spine that gets drawn out here, and then just very gently pulls back, contracts back. Same thing between your hips and your shoulders, going up your back. So now, when that happens, what you have to do is leave your arms out in front and not let them swing back. So inevitably they will come up. So this is Fisherman Cast and net. I've got that angle there. And if I just come back, I maintain the angle. And then as my hand comes up, I let my elbow drop down. And that brings fingers over the top of the circle. So this is very much like Fisherman Cast and net. But then I just don't let the hand swing back. So I exert a little bit of willpower, a little bit of intent into maintaining that angle just here. And then the pigeon spreads its wings. Here, of course, we really do feel that opening of the chest. But keep doing this, but just consider this. If I go back to bird folds its wings and I get to here, really all I have to do is, if I just raise my hands a little bit, then that would take me to pigeon spreads its wings. And of course, when I do it from here, I maintain that position with my arm, just as I did with the ball rolling movement a few moments ago. So in fact, what raises my arms is this movement here coming back up. So all of these little movements combine like the pieces of a jigsaw to produce the bigger movements. This is very much how Tai Chi works. It's very subtle. And as always, our awareness is a key component here. But what it does mean is, if you're feeling, well, my arms aren't moving very much, you want a bit more movement. Don't try and move your arms, but just think, well, okay, maybe if I can come back up a bit more effectively, open the chest, let the shoulder blades come a little bit closer together, and so on and so forth. Just working with whatever seems appropriate. It's not a set system, but whatever you're able to encompass in what I'm saying, so that you gradually build the movement from the inside out. It helps the movement to be more sustainable. It's much less of a strain on the body, and also more fluid. Good, and then pushing away. here, as you go forwards, quite deliberately use that opening and closing in your chest to draw your elbows in and push them out. So you see, again, if I exaggerate there, as I go forwards, chest closes, elbows come in, and that adds to the power of the push. One more time. And then hands fisted. One more time. Turning your hands out. Good. Now, polishing the table. Turn your hands palm down. Turn so you feel as though your spine is going that way. You turn to your left, spine goes right, and then back, hips go back. Swing around. So try and move from that area where your spine goes into your pelvis, lower part of your back. One more time. Bring the weight back to this middle position, central position. Turn your hands palm up, pushing down equally through feet and hips, and then releasing, letting the body contract. As though your body, upper body fills up from beneath. One more time. As we move into the Wild Goose, once again, we can really feel that sense of expansion, of opening through the chest. In a slightly different way, not so much folding in and out as it is sort of broadening across the ribs. Parting the clouds. Here as your hands come together, very broad across your back. And again, that contraction, not just in your shoulder blades, but down the entire length of your back, the two sides of your back drawing towards each other, and then being very gently pulled apart. Let your hands come down. Dragon plucks the stars from the sky. Extending, contracting. Extending and contracting. One more each side. And then both hands so in the standing version of this one, there would be no definite up and down movement in our hips. Hips would be hanging back, of course, but not necessarily rising and falling. So we're focused very much into the center part of our body here. And if you just imagine there's something like a balloon or ball there, and what's happening is as you bring your hands in, it's like somebody's compressing the ball, and eventually that will reach a point where it pushes back out. And you get that rhythm of expansion and contraction building. In some ways, you could regard that middle area as the meeting point between upper and lower body. Your upper body is trying to sink down, but your lower body is one of the main areas concerned with this response to the pull of gravity, to develop a springy kind of resistance to being pulled all the way down, that in most cases will eventually just transform to an outward movement because it becomes too much effort. You'd have to really squeeze on the ball hard. Like if you push a ball down into water, the first little bit is relatively easy, but the deeper you push it, the harder it is to actually keep it being pressed down. So this builds a certain inner strength if we take this approach to the art. So this time, scooping the sea and looking at the sky. Putting the foot out enables us to go a little bit further forward, but was always very, very careful with your back. You'll feel the pull in your back and in the back of your leg, but just before that gets uncomfortable, just before it stiffens and tightens, you just allow that part of the body to contract and draw you back. Switch sides. Now, staying on this side, so staying at this angle, but now just do this as a version of bird folds its wings, dangling forwards on the diagonal line. At the same time, there's a little bit of a push from your hips. It makes you feel as though your head is being pushed upwards and outwards on that diagonal line. So remember the spine lengthening. And then as you go forwards and the head going up, just use that to draw your hands up, make into a hollow fist. As you go forward, your spine begins to lengthen, as well as the chest closing, and between them and that movement of the weight, momentum that comes from weight change, albeit quite subtle in this one, then sufficient energy to bring your hands around into grasping the tiger's ears. We go back to the first side, and again, this kind of one-legged version almost of bird folds its wings to begin with. Remember, with that lengthening through the crown of your head, loosely fist your hands. And then feeling the expansion upwards. So if we take each individual component of the movement, each individual stage of the movement, very subtle, they don't create any feeling of tightening or stress on our body, blocking that sense of internal movement. After that, it's just a case of getting them in the right order, if that makes sense. So just that can be quite difficult. But as we get beyond that, we lose even that idea, and we just know the movement without having to consciously think about it. Bring your feet parallel. Now go back to this circular movement. You turn the body, you go, if you turn to the right, your weight goes to the right, and then you go back into your hip. When you turn to the left, your weight goes to the left hip, and then forwards. So thinking about parting the wild horse's mane, we come back into our right hip, and then we go forward into the left hip and back again. But now we want to move from the left hip, you come back into your right hip. When you turn a little bit, that's the straight line across the bottom of the X, because you now come into your left side and you go forward into the right leg, diagonal leg, and then coming back and turning to move across. Hands in front of you, so they get familiar with following the pattern. And then we're going to bring the arms into the movement. So go across into your right hip, go forward, and as you turn, just feed. So to your left, rather, you go to your left now, and then you come back. We have part in the wild horse's mane. So what we've got here, the top hand will go straight down to the rest of it. Doesn't do anything fancy. As we go forward into the right, it's like we're pushing into something with our shoulder and our elbow, almost like there's a door in front of you, and you're pushing into the door just to create the space, and then you turn your body, and the turning sort of feeds your hands through the door. You come back into your left hip, hold the ball. Now we make that movement across into the right hip, so we turn slightly, and then going forwards here, and then turn as you feel that you might have created that space, and then back, hold the ball and across. Parting the wild horse's mane. Do one more on each side. And then just let your hands drop down. And once again, just rubbing your hands together. Starting as always with your face. Over your head and neck. And one shoulder, your arm. The other side. The belly. I'll sit back on and you next. So you want the muscles of the legs to really feel as though they're being woken up. So I generally use my fists. So it's quite a strong movement, but do it however you wish. And then also pushing your knee up and down. And going around. And then on the other side. Around. Stand. So your weight and movement of your weight, where your weight is, and awareness of where your weight is one of the great determining factors in Tai Chi. So that awareness that we build in the seated exercises should actually serve you very, very nicely now. And in the chair, we have 60% of our weight back, a little bit forwards, and that provides the support from the legs. But now, with just the legs there, it's kind of the other way around. Come forwards till you got about sort of 70% of your weight in the front half of your feet, and exaggerate to see how that pulls, sort of angles me forwards, and your hips just dropping back. And when that happens, that should bring you to an upright stance. Try not to do this. Pull your shoulders back. It's very much here. And again, we call it sitting. Yesterday, somebody said something very interesting in one of my classes. She said she was trained, she did dance when she was younger. She was trained as a dancer, ballet and things like that. And she said, what I just said, I said about sitting into the hips. And she said that they were told to do the exact opposite. They were told not to sit into their hips. So a lot of dance stuff and a lot of movement stuff that comes from our own history, our own culture, doesn't do this, it does this. It tries to project out. And I think it's important to realize that this is, again, quite different in some ways to other forms of exercise. At first, it feels like you're doing the opposite thing. But in fact, what we're doing is we're sinking down, and then we're allowing the body to grow. But it isn't this, it isn't the whole body coming up. There's still the root there. So it's like a plant growing out of its seed. So from here, just sinking down and pushing up. So what happens when we do this standing is you can imagine pushing down with your feet, and that pushes your hips up, your legs get longer, that pushes up into your back, your spine is pushed up, so like your head is pushed up, so your spine gets longer, and then everything reverses and it goes down again. But really important to feel that sense of your feet going down. It's a fundamental difference between what we do here and say what you might do in, I don't know, an aerobics class. I'm not saying it's any better necessarily, but it means that when we go to do the exercises, this is how we need to move, because otherwise we're not doing the exercise. So when you bring your hands around in front of you, that expansion in the upper body moves your arms for you, but you've still very much got that sense of the root. And when you come up to here. You don't go all the way up. It's there. And again, if you want bigger movement, if you want more extension, which is not an unreasonable aim, then we have to build it from the root. It's like a tree. when its branches go out further, its roots go out further. And then the wild goose. And I've heard comments like that before from people who are trained in Western dance, that they're being asked to do, sort of go against their training in a way. I need to go back a bit, sorry. So you can see my fingers now as I push up, and part in the clouds. One more time. Okay, and then shake out. So you could say whether we're seated or whether we're standing, the first act of any exercising that we do in Tai Chi is always a downward movement through the feet or through the hips. So you can have one foot forwards. When I do this, I sit down in this leg, and the first thing I do is I actually push the foot down. I mean, you can try this if you like. Be careful of your knee. So I'm pushing and I'm going up and down. But actually, I don't want to go up and down. So when I feel that push, I direct it forwards. And then I do the same thing here. I can push up and down in this leg. But instead of going up and down, I direct it forwards. So that's a will to do that. And you may even find, even in this movement where we're not really using the upper body, that the very act of pushing downwards creates almost a feeling of pressure in the lower part of your back. So even though we're not trying to do this or anything like that, there is still, as we do this, a sense of an upward movement through your spine. It's a good way of making sure you make that connection downwards each time. If you think like this, it also makes the movement forwards and backwards much stronger. So it's not this. You have to sit there. This, well, I'm going to sink down so I can get ready to push. And again, as I've said before, that little moment of stillness, and then raising your toes and your heel. Put the heel down. Give it a little push from the front. Take your time. If you practice like this, then what will happen is you'll gradually improve your route overall, both in this exercise and in normal walking. Stepping in. It also means that you have to put the foot down before, because if I go to move my foot here and I give the little push, that can happen. And then on the other side, so same thing, sinking down and then pushing back. After a while, you'll realize that actually what I've described as a push, that makes it sound like you're actively pushing your foot down into the ground. But actually, what's happening is as I sink down, my legs being compressed And over a period of time, your legs develop a springiness. And actually, what happens is if you've got a spring and you push it down, it naturally pushes back. Or you get a ball in water, you push the ball down into water, and eventually the water pushes it back up. So after a while, the next stage, if you like, of this isn't to actively push down, but is rather to sit back and to wait until you feel as though the leg is pushing you back. Raising your toes and your heel. And then stepping in. And step through. Plant the foot, wait until you feel that little bit of a push from the compression of the supporting leg. And then reverse that. So this really focuses your attention very closely on what's going on within your body as you walk. Okay, and then 1 foot forward and fisherman cast and net. And this is where we feel that extension, that movement upwards to our spine, beginning to flow forwards and to help move the arms. So again, we wait until we feel the push coming from the extension of the supporting leg that has just been compressed. And we just have this intent, this will, an act of will to direct it not just forward and backwards now, but to allow some of it upwards and through, as it were, moving the arms forward. There's still the opening and closing in the chest and so on and so forth. And then on the other side, this gives the appearance of a movement that is effortless. It isn't effortless, it's just a different type of effort. Normally when we see a movement like this, and a lot of people do this still in Tai Chi, it's like, oh, I've got to move my arms, but you haven't. What you've got to do is sink into your back leg, wait until you feel the movement coming back up, feel that movement going through the spine, and then let your arms pick up on that. And that's when we start to get the real flow of the movement. And this is a good exercise to practice that with. Because it's very straightforward. You say, I'm going forward. I'm letting the expansion here push me forwards a little bit. My arms have to come through. And then I've got this opening and closing in the chest that complements that. I mean, in a way, I mean, that is also connected to the movement in your legs and so on and so forth. So still the primary aim is to sink, to sit into the hips and to feel what comes out of that for you. One more time. Okay, and shake out. So the effort that we require to do Tai Chi is quite different to how we might say, I'm trying to think something. Well, actually, it doesn't have to be, but it often is, because we're often encouraged to move in a different way. When I talk about, something like ballet comes out of a way of thinking about ourselves and our bodies, and is a reflection of that way of thinking. We're very upper body orientated, very hands orientated. Arts like Tai Chi asks us to reverse that, not bother about the arms and the hands, but rather to think about how the arms and the hands respond to what's happening in our feet, and so on and so forth. I think the chair training is very good for that. You can do the same thing here. If you just rock your weight forwards and backwards, you let yourself sink down into, I'm going to exaggerate again. You go back, it's almost like you're doing this. It's almost like you're sinking into the chair. And then you get pushed forwards, as it were. Boom. And you can see, if you watch how my back curves, that's exaggerated. I don't want you to do that. But when I do it properly, I sit here and I still feel that kind of curvature in my back. It's like if you get a flexible stick and you push it at either end, it bends and it bows and then it springs back. They talk about a stick of willow, nice soft, supple wood, but very strong. And so we start to get that in both directions. Now, as you do this, what we're doing at the moment is we're doing this alternately. We're pushing through the hips, we're pushing through the feet. But now let your hands drop down, and instead of going feet, hips, do both together. And the resultant movement is an upward movement, taking us into embrace tiger, return to the mountain. So you may or may not get these points to start off with, but just think about them a little bit. But now just feeling that cycle of movement that comes from the downward pressure through feet, through hips, coming up through your body, arms getting heavier until you just naturally yield. We don't want to strain. And so just allowing, once again, this cycle of movement through the body. Essentially, from this point on, we're reloading hips and feet, but we're also, as I've said before, able to follow the movement back into our center, back into our root, and with the resultant quietening of our attention. So there's many elements to this that start to come together. And rest. Lovely. Thank you very much again, everybody. So,
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mike.
Enjoy the rest of the